we asked the question, why would anybody want to go to South America? And the answer, as it's shared in the bulletin, was because we had never been there before. And we love to travel. And where did that come from? Well, for me, I guess I was brought up that way, that my parents liked to travel and see different things. And as a youngster, we went on various trips, never in motels, always on tenting. A tent first, and then we moved up to where we got a fold-down camper. We went generally to the west, because it's easier to go west camping. We went to Washington when I was very young. Went to California when I was 13. That was a big trip. Went to Colorado, went to Banff. Did go to Montreal World's Fair. And so I like history, and I like seeing different things, parts of the country, especially historical things. And so when it came time to finding a spouse, in this day and age, you put down, you do this on the computer, right? You put down, what do you like? You want to find somebody that loves to travel, right? I mean, that would be the thing I'd be looking for. But this was before the age of computers. This was 55 years ago that I met Jolene. And 57 was it? Something like that. Okay. But how many states had you been to at that point here?
Yeah, I, on the other hand, grew up as the oldest of 6 kids, and my father was a dairy farmer. Yeah. So you can imagine how much I traveled. I can remember going on vacation once before I was like 6, just once. That's the only time I ever remember going on vacation. So, how many states had I been to? 2.
Minnesota and Iowa, right? But I did find her to be a very trusting person. One time we were out, I don't know what we did, some kind of date or whatever, college, and we were driving, and she's very trusting. She didn't ask me where I was going. I could have been a serial killer or something.
We've been dating for a while.
Yeah, we've been dating for a while. And anyway, I guess you were a little wondering where that was strange, but she didn't.
I mean, it just didn't seem like we were going back to campus.
No. And then I asked her, I said, do you know where we are? And where were we?
Wisconsin.
We were in Wisconsin.
I've never been there before.
Yeah, we went to college at Concordia at St. Paul, and Wisconsin, Hudson's not that far, really. So that was her 3rd state. But since then, she's caught the travel bug. She really has. She's probably ready to go even more so than I am. But in those early years, we also, our first years of marriage, I think a year before we got married, I bought a tent.
You did.
Because you start out with a tent. And I think when we were in seminary, we had more time than money. I think we took one trip to the Northeast, all the way from Washington, D.C., all the way to Maine. Another trip to the Southeast. We went down to Disney World and came back through New Orleans, I think, didn't we? And
Texas, too.
And Texas, yeah. And then after I graduated from seminary, I was placed in Spring, Texas. So we drove down there from the seminary and then drove back to Minnesota from Houston to be ordained and see family and such. And of course, driving from Houston, Texas to St. Paul, we went through Colorado.
Because we've never been there before.
I had never got there, yeah. That was the scenic route. We like to take the scenic route. And so we saw different things. And so we continued the tent for many years until we also, at some point, bought a fold-down camper. And then the kids, we subjected the kids to traveling, the family road trips and such. I remember first year I got 4 weeks vacation, was in Albert Lake. And we took off, we went to California. And I think we were gone 3.5 weeks with the fold-down camper. The congregation thought I'd left them, I think. They couldn't believe I was gone that long. But anyway, since then, especially since the last 20 years, since the kids were grown and such, we've traveled quite a bit. Took several trips with the congregation, and those are really neat. Some of you were on those. And also several others. We've been to Europe a few times. We do sabbatical, as most of you know, in Uganda, in Africa, and we've been to the Holy Land twice. And so a few years ago, they were thinking, well, where do we go next? And we're thinking, we've never been to South America. We had not been. How many of you have ever been to South America? There might be some here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, a few. Okay, good. But it's not a place people normally go to. And so we said we want to go to South America. We looked at things we wanted to see. And we wanted to see the Amazon. Why do you want to see the Amazon here?
Okay, I wanted to see the Amazon because I remember being in 8th grade in a small Lutheran school in geography class, and the first lesson that year was about South America, and particularly about the Amazon, and it talked about the rainforest, and I just thought, well, wouldn't that be really cool to be standing there in the middle of the Amazon and having the rain just pouring down on you? Well,
And other things
yeah,
too.
other things too, but anyway, yeah, insects, yeah.
But anyway, we planned that trip 2 years ago. We also wanted to see like Rio de Janeiro and Buenos Aires and several other things. And you can't do everything. South America's a big place, right? It really is. And so that was not something that we accomplished then. So we hadn't been there. So this trip came up last January that we were going to see the Amazon. And we did. And everybody's interested in the Amazon. That really sounds exotic. But I would say we probably saw more in that first trip. So this is really a 2-part presentation. We're going backwards. Doing the Amazon thing first, okay? But then we'll show you also the other things we saw in South America on the first trip. But on the South America, on the Amazon, this was in January, and we left the day that Pastor Andy was installed. And our first flights, it was arranged through Viking. We took a Viking cruise, and the first flights they gave us, we were to leave Rochester. We'd like to fly out of Rochester. That's wonderful. It really is. You can see Tom Worley there, and he'll let you take anything. No, not really. It's so laid back. It really is. And so our flights they gave us first were, we left Rochester Airport at 3 o'clock. And that's the same time the installation was, which was kind of a bummer, but it was already set months before. And we fly from Rochester to Chicago, Chicago to Los Angeles, Los Angeles to Miami, and Miami to Brazil. And we get there about 30 hours later. You see, the connections are not as good to going to South America as they are going to Europe. They're not. And I think it was in December, we had our family Christmas, they called from Viking. They said, well, we noticed this is really kind of a strange connections you've got here. I said, yeah. And they said, well, we can get you out of Minneapolis the next morning if you want to do that. I think Minneapolis. And we get a flight that goes directly to Miami from Minneapolis, leaves at 6 a.m. Now the bummer of that is we're flying back to Rochester, so we couldn't just drive up there, and that shuttle service doesn't go that early. So my sister was there for Christmas. She said, well, you can stay overnight at our house. They live in Maplewood, and we'll bring you there in the middle of the night. And I can't believe that. But then we still had to get to Rochester, to St. Paul the night before, because we couldn't drive because the car would have to be back here. So Paul Colby was generously offered to bring us up there that evening of the installation. So we went up there. After the installation.
Got to see it.
My sister's house, got there in the middle of the night, and we left for Miami, and then from Miami we flew to Manaus, Brazil. And Manaus is a big city in the Amazon. There's not many cities in the Amazon, but Manaus is a city of 2 billion people, and it's the main city of the Amazon, and you can see there the border between the Amazon rainforest and where the city is. And it was -4 when we left here that morning in Minneapolis. It was 86 above. Because keep in mind, the seasons are reversed in the southern hemisphere, but this is right about at the equator, so it's warm all the time. So 86 degrees. So we got there, we left 6 a.m., we got to our motel there at 10:30 p.m. We crashed, we stayed in the motel there overnight, we went to the ship the next day. And we went on the Viking Sea. We got there about 11 a.m. the next day. We had never been on a Viking ocean cruise. Actually never been on Viking at all before. And this was interesting. They have small ocean ships. It's not like some of these that you hear that 6,000 or 8,000 people. This doesn't look small, but it only holds 930, which is, it's big, but not like that monster ships, I would say. 900 passengers. The average age was 70. And we just fit right in. And they really know their market. They really do. There were maybe a smattering of people under 50 and a smattering in their 80s and 90s, but most, I would say, were in the 60s and 70s. They really cater to that market. There's not casinos as they advertise. There's no children allowed. There's no wet T-shirt contests. But they really cater things to people our age and interest with the programs and things. So Viking is expensive. It really is. Even though we got the cheapest cabin you could get, but it's more expensive than other trips we've taken. But they really do take care of you. And I'm not advertising. Just they do. You pay for it. So we went to Manaus, and the river levels can vary by as much as 40 feet on the Amazon. And that's scary. It was really scary because we had this plan for January, and in December we started hearing that they couldn't get up the Amazon that far because it had been a dry year, and a ship that size could not get to where we were going and starting. And so they had to redo some of those. The cruise was the Amazon and the Caribbean. They'd say, we'll take you around the Caribbean, but we can't go up the Amazon. And I'd go, oh, no, that's where we were going. That's why we're going. So I was watching, and my wife said, don't worry about it. You can do it. But I worried about it. She didn't. I was worrying for both of us. But finally, the first time the ships could get up that far was in January 2nd or something. We were there the 16th or something like that. So the ship was able to go there. And this is the view from our port. The pier is a floating pier. I don't have a picture of that here, but it's on floats. And it's huge. At one time I saw 6 buses on that pier, floating, because they can vary that much as far as the height of the river. This was something I've not seen anyplace else before. The size of the buildings in Manaus. Look at the murals on it. Has anybody seen that anyplace else before, something like that? It's where?
Farm silos.
Farm silos in Iowa. Well, yeah, I suppose that's where they got the idea from. And by the way, anybody has questions, I just shout it out. It's kind of boring, So anyway, but these were interesting. So, and then we took a tour of the city, and we discovered that Manaus really flourished in the early 1900s because of rubber trees. And what did they need in the early 1900s? Tires and such. It was flourishing. And it was called Manaus was called the Paris of the Amazon. And it was really a rather ornate place. And this opera house was built in 1896. And they got precious elements from all over the world to come there. Now this next one, I hope it doesn't make you dizzy. That's flat. That's flat. It's one of those three-dimensional things. So, but that was right by the opera house. The city, however, the city's not real prosperous after that because, and at some point in the 1920s or 30s, something like that, they discovered that rubber trees actually grow better in Malaysia. And they started growing the rubber there, and the rubber industry went down. It really did. And so they were really kind of depressed after that. Since then, the government of Brazil gives them tax breaks for companies that want to come in there and manufacture and all that. They get some real good tax breaks. And of course, they love tourism. They do. It's important. So we went on a tour of the city, and our guide was named Herzog. And he grew up in a native village. And there's not so many indigenous people there anymore. But we went to the Indigenous People Museum in Manaus. And there he's standing by one of his ancestors there. The one in red is the live one. Okay. But it was kind of neat that he actually grew up in one of these villages. And to the top right, that's what happens when you die. They put you like in an open coffin and float you out down one of the river tributaries. And the animals and such, you just go back to nature. So, and to us that sounds kind of, you know, but I mean, the result is the same in the end, right? You know, it is. On the bottom there, that's a picture of the hammocks, or it is a hammock, one of the ones that they would sleep in. Now, some of you are probably thinking, you know, we got to these native villages. No, they don't. I guess you can go there, but we were looking more in from the outside. As we left Manaus, you get a better view of the city. Again, it's a big city, 2 million people. There's that floating greenery there. And I'm not sure what it was, but actually it grows out there. It floats, and it just floats along. That was intriguing. Now, this was really something. And I should mention, Manaus is 1,000 miles up the Amazon from the mouth in the Atlantic. Okay, it's about 4,000 miles altogether, but this is 1,000 miles. It's kind of like compared to Winona to New Orleans. Okay, is where we got on the Amazon. Now here, two major tributaries of the Amazon come together, two big rivers, and one of them has brown water and one has dark water. And they come together, and what's strange is they don't mix for about 6 miles. You're going down the Amazon, and you can see this. You can see the division between the two waters, and they explain why it works that way. It has something to do with different mineral contents or whatever. It doesn't mix. After about 6, 7 miles, they actually mix together. That was really interesting to see. Yeah, Kurt?
Just to show how big the Amazon is at the mouth, I believe the river is 150 miles wide at the mouth.
Yeah, probably something 150 miles wide at the mouth. Probably it goes all different directions. It's huge.
Yeah, right.
And we'll talk about that later too. But the Amazon, I think, is the second longest river, I think, after the Nile. But it's the largest in terms of the amount of water that's in it. It's just huge. So, also going down the Amazon and the river, I asked the kids, what do you want for Christmas? A nice pair of binoculars. So I enjoyed sitting on our balcony, and all the rooms have balconies. Sitting on the balconies, just kind of looking along and seeing and such. So we went in style. More native people would travel on a boat on the bottom left there. Can you figure out what that is in the big picture? Hammocks. Yeah, because it would take 5 or 6 days for these ferries to get to the mouth, and they would need to bring along their own hammocks to sleep, their own food and such. Maybe feel kind of, oh boy, you know, what are we doing? You know, taking pictures of them, I guess. So, keep in mind, we're showing you some big cities. Basically, along the Amazon, it's nothing. It's just forest. Except right along the shore, there's a little bit more activity. But there are no bridges across the Amazon. Think of that, no bridges. And if you think about it, why? First of all, bridges are expensive, and it's a long ways across, and there's not that many people to see across, so they have ferries that go across. So now we went to Puritans. We used a tender. You know, that tender there, that little boat you see, would bring us to shore. That little boat could hold 225 people. Of course, that's really socking them in. But that's in case the ship goes down or something, which eventually it didn't. But some places you can't go right up to the shore. You got to tender in. There we saw an energetic folkloric performance called Boi Bomba. It's Brazil's second largest celebration after Carnival in Rio. And it's held every June, but just for the tourists. They do performances in the afternoon for cruise ships and such. And this is kind of hard to really, you have to be there. The costuming, the music, it went on for an hour. It was all in Portuguese, so I didn't know what the story was about. But it was energetic. They just kept going for an hour. And the beautiful costumes. It combined Amazonian, African, and European rhythms. In the evening, back on the ship, something a little bit more sedate. They had evening programs, not the big shows like they have in the mega ships, but smaller ones. And here we had 4 young people, 3 from England and 1 from Canada. And they had the neatest singing performances. And what do you suppose the music was from? The 50s and 60s. Good stuff. Yes, they really were. They know their audience. They do. And so I think about 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 different evenings they were on with it. And just excellent. So on Friday morning, we had an early drive to Tapajos National Park. This was an optional excursion that we signed up for. At first, it said this was more active. There's the easy, medium, and more active. And I really wanted to get out to the Amazon forest. And my
So
wife,
did I.
she did too, but she was kind of wondering about how active is it. But it just meant it was long. She did it because she was determined. So we went to this national forest, and there we're starting to see some of the real Amazon, where we could walk through the Amazon, and it's thick forest. Now here, where they took us, there's actually paths. Before we left, I read 2 books I got from the local library on the Amazon. One was a guy who paddled the entire length of the Amazon. Took it like 6 or 8 months or something like that in a canoe or a kayak or whatever. Now that's roughing it. Another book I read, the guy walked the entire length of the Amazon. Took him 3.5 years. Now, most places, there's not roads alongside the Amazon, so how do you get through? You got one of those, what do you call those things? Yeah, and you whack your way through. 3.5 years. And they had all kinds of strange stuff, and the water goes up and down. Some guys would be all water, be kind of flooded near the Amazon, but no, that wasn't for us. This was close enough. So, this was when the wildfires were going on in California, and this was intriguing. Our guy started a fire of the leaves on the floor of the Amazon. I'm thinking, oh boy. They would go out, they burn a little bit and go out, because I guess it's so humid, they don't have to worry about forest fires there. It just went out. Here, on the right side, the guy is making a cut in a rubber tree, and the rounded picture, that shows where the latex just kind of flows out from that rubber tree. I don't think we see many of those around here. 2 early explorers overlooking the river valley. They told us to wear long sleeves and all that long past that day because of the mosquitoes, but thankfully they weren't that bad. Now, here's some of the wildlife we saw. On the left side, our guide gathered multiple ants. On the left side, that's the bark of the tree. It's kind of a close-up of the bark. And there's this ant swarming all over it. He picked those, got a bunch of them, and he rubs them on his arm. Made for a natural bug insect repellent. Interesting. I didn't try it, but I took his word for it. Then, in the middle picture, he takes a stick. This is not too far away. He takes a stick. He reaches down, and he gets an ant that comes up on that stick. And he's got a close-up there on the right. That ant, he says, you don't want. If that one bites you or stings you or whatever, you got to get to the emergency room right away. It can be fatal. So we didn't mess with any ants. Now there's all kinds of bad stuff, anaconda, piranhas, and all that stuff. No, we didn't see that. We were just tourists, So if you came to see that, sorry about that. So, and then here's a native using his machete to cut open the pod. He gave each of us a fresh Brazil nut out of there. Now on the right-hand side, can you see that's a spigot in the tree? You can turn that on and water comes out. I'm not sure how much, but that's what it's for. We saw some huge trees. And you can just see the perspective by the people next to them, just huge. On the way back from this national park, it was an interesting drive. We passed by Belterra. Some of you might have heard of Belterra or Fordlandia. Have any of you ever heard of those?
Yeah.
Some of you have Fordlandia and Belterra. Those were two communities that Henry Ford established in the Amazon. Why? Rubber. They did rubber for the Fords. Yeah, absolutely. And they sent down managers in the United States, and they employed all the natives, gave them jobs, but didn't work out. I guess just clash of cultures or something like that. They're basically in ruins now. That's the entrance to to Belterra, which is one of those two communities that was a nice thought in theory, but I guess didn't work out very well. Now, it's a little bit of summary of the Amazon. The Amazon forest spans 9 countries. It's huge. 20% of the Earth's bird species are found in the Amazon. 427 different mammal species. 40,000 plant species. And 2,500,000 insect species. Oh my goodness. Oh,
Let's bring them all home.
yeah.
But only 80% of them are poisonous.
Only 80% are poisonous. Like I say, they said to bring along insect spray, and that we doused ourselves pretty good before going off in the forest. Well, surprisingly, that day, there weren't that many mosquitoes. And after a while, we peeled off a little bit. But I guess it's in the evening. It's a lot worse. So, on the way back, there's an hour drive to this national park. It reminded us of the time we spent in Uganda on sabbatical some 19 years ago. Look at that soil. Looks just like southern Minnesota? No. But it looks like Uganda, same kind of soil. The buildings looked a lot like Uganda. In Manaus, I went for a walk that first morning. I noticed they had fences and walls around different businesses and barbed wire on top. That was like Uganda too. We did not feel unsafe, but in many of these countries, apparently here as well as in Uganda, the assumption is if I have little and you have more, there's nothing wrong with me helping myself to some of your more. It just kind of evens things up, and so theft is a big problem. So, some similarities. Now this is Santarem, this is the way back to the hike, and again, that's the second largest city on the Amazon, about 300,000. And most all the people in the Amazon live in one of these 3 cities that we saw, that we stopped, that we overnighted at. So, now I enjoyed sitting on the balcony. This is just panning the Amazon as we're now on our way to the Atlantic. It gets wider and wider. We pass the equator at some point here. It's the world's 4,000 miles long. During the dry season, it's 2 to 6 miles wide on average. During the rainy season, it can be as wide as 30 miles. Okay, and down by the mouth of it, it's even wider than that because it goes in all different tributaries and such. But it's amazing. It's just huge. And along the way, like I said, first all the people live in the cities, but you do see some houses and such along the way, and they had cattle and such, and the houses are all built on stilts. I think you can figure out why. Water levels go up and down and such. So I use my binoculars to kind of spy on people and as we went by. Now we get out to the Atlantic Ocean, and we're going to go through this kind of quickly because this is something on the Caribbean. But after 2 sea days, we reach the French Guiana, which is actually part of France on the northeastern coast of South America. This was a notorious prison colony from 1852 until 1952. France sent their worst prisoners, in some cases they were political prisoners, they sent them there. 80,000 spent some time there. And the worst prisoners were kept on Devil's Island on the far right. Albert Dreyfus, you maybe heard that name sometime or other, was a famous French political prisoner. And actually, he was Jewish, I think, so they kind of pinned something on him, Epstein. He turned out to be innocent, but he spent time there, probably the most famous of the prisoners there. It looks nice, but because of the heat, humidity, yellow fever, malaria, and harsh treatment, most prisoners only lived 8 to 19 months. Few ever returned to France. They never really completed their sentences because it was just too harsh of conditions. We were glad to be just visiting. This was solitary there, and solitary is really solitary. There's the movie Papillon a few years ago, 2 different things, movies of that name, and that took place here on this at this particular place. And they showed that movie on the big screen in the theater a day or two before we got there, which was interesting to see. Also, recently, I've read in the last couple of months that France is going to build a new prison in French Guiana, probably not here, these ruins, but to send their worst prisoners again. So, interesting. There was a chapel there. It was sobering to see the children's cemetery, where many of the children and guards were interred. And during our 2 hours there, we saw lots of critters, monkeys, and that little one, I can't remember the name of that, some kind of critter. Anyway. That evening, back to the luxury of our cruise ship, and Jenna, she's the cruise ship director. She's also a singer. She put on the show. She also led the interdenominational worship service on Sunday morning. It was very nice. It was 18 minutes long. That was interesting. It was nice if they had that. And then we went to Barbados. We had never much been to the Caribbean. Some of you have been. We went to 4 different islands in the Barbados. And there was like 5 or 6 different ships there. Ours is way in the back. There's a smaller one than these. And this was an interesting view from our balcony, a working shipyard. We were right outside of it. We saw sugarcane fields. Barbados has about 300,000 people. While they like tourists, they do not encourage foreign ownership. Come, pay, and leave, please. We saw this Anglican church that dates back to 1645. And our guide warned us about the mahogany trees. The sign says, parking under the trees is at your own risk because of these mahogany. I'm not sure what comes in the nuts or the syrup or whatever, but I know it used to be on the north side of our parking lot, there was a walnut tree. Remember that? And sometimes if you parked underneath there, you had one dirty vehicle. Eventually they had to be cut down, which is, I hated to lose the shade, but it was also a little cleaner. So the next day brought us to St. Lucia, which is a beautiful volcanic island first settled in 1605. Just a beautiful place. I took a walk in the downtown Castries in the morning. Our tour driver skillfully navigated the narrow, twisty, hilly roads. There's no zoning whatsoever, which makes for interesting development. Most of the houses were on stilts. They furnish the top floor first and then the lower level as they have money, I guess. I thought it would be maybe for lights or something, but no, this is up higher. And originally it was a British colony, originally French, later became a British colony. They've got 180,000 residents. Interesting that this island has about the same population as Olmsted County. It's about the size of Olmsted County, as each one of these are independent nations. Think about that. If Olmsted County was an independent nation. The economy was initially based on sugar, gradually shifted to bananas. Now 56% comes from tourism. Beautiful place. We stopped at Stony Brook, a private residence, saw all kinds of gardens there and such. We had some rum punch, we bought some banana ketchup. I should have brought that along today. They could have put that aside. Yeah, so if you need some banana ketchup sometime, we've got some. And then we went to Antigua. I explored that on foot in the morning. There's a theme here. See, one of us likes to sleep late in the morning.
He walked, I slept. In the morning.
This is the Anglican Cathedral of St. John, dating from 1634. This building is from 1847. And we had great views, what's called Shirley's Heights. Christopher Columbus visited here in 1493. It's amazing how many of these islands Columbus got to, long before anybody in Europe got to Minnesota. Long before. The history goes way back. On the round picture on the peninsula, you can hardly see there's a really neat mansion, 15 million mansion built by Eric Clapton, the musician. So, Nelson's Dockyard was a famous British naval base dating from 1744, still owned by the British Crown, and it's a playground for the rich and famous, is what I would say. That round picture, Princess Margaret stayed there on her honeymoon in that place until all the paparazzi forced her to retreat to someplace more private, I guess. And here was something that was really neat. First of all, that palm tree on the left was planted by Queen Elizabeth when she visited in 1966. And on the right, the rounded picture, this was just by chance. Sometimes you see things that you don't expect. And that was the case here. This 4-man crew started rowing in, and we learned that this was the culmination of a month-long race from Africa. They went across the ocean, and you see that little boat there, 4-person crew, and they were all coming in about this day, I guess, or something like that, and one just happened to be coming in, and there you see them waving at people. Their families were there. They hadn't seen them in a month. And they're, yay, here we are. And it was really exciting to see. I'm not sure I would do the same thing. I mean, that's and then we went back to our big, luxurious ship. Traveling through the countryside. That's the Pepto-Bismol church, bottom left, our guide said. So another great evening program with our musicians. Last stop, Puerto Rico. That's where we ended up. And I think of Puerto Rico as very poor, and I know it is, but there's also some parts that are very nice, which was in San Juan. It's kind of like when we were in Uganda, it's very poor, but Kampala, you also see some very big, fancy buildings. It's the haves and the have-nots. Big modern buildings and such. There we are along the ocean. There's the beach, which we didn't have time to sit out and enjoy the beach, but we saw the beach. Our ship was docked just blocks away from Old San Juan, a protected area, which all the buildings were built from the 1500s through the 1700s. Think of that, how old that is. The Castillo on the bottom right there was built in 1634 to protect the city. This is the Cathedral of San Juan Bautista, begun in 1535, oldest cathedral in the Western Hemisphere. Think of that. Wow. So we're able to go inside. Christopher Columbus discovered Puerto Rico on his second voyage in 1493. And Ponce de Leon was the first governor of Puerto Rico. What do you know about Ponce de Leon that you learned about in school many years ago? Fount of Youth. Do you think he found it? Well, his burial's there, his tomb, so I guess he didn't. But he's buried in that particular church, Ponce de Leon. So, St. Augustine, what?
You can drink out of it.
Oh, you can drink out of it in St. Augustine.
Yeah.
Does it work?
You've done it look younger.
And the next morning, we left our ship at 4:30 a.m. to catch our 8:30 flight, lay over to Chicago, back to Winter, Minnesota by 10 p.m. that night. Okay. This is intermission now, as I change to the other trip. We're going to go backwards, so get up and stretch if you want. It can be just a minute, I think. So let's see. Now the first trip, one I saw you, which was actually the second one, was on a Viking ocean cruise, and they really pamper you There's lots of stuff on the ship and such. It's really relaxing. This first trip was completely different. This was a bus trip mainly, and I would say it's not as relaxing, but you see a lot more on a bus trip. This was Gate 1, which is a very good company and such. But we enjoyed both. They're both different. They are. So anyway, this was in October. We decided to go in October because this is Southern Hemisphere. That would be comparable to what month here? April. Okay? And we were going to go different places, like Rio de Janeiro, which is really hot. Down in Patagonia, which is cold. So we tried to get kind of in between the seasons. And that's what it worked out pretty well. So on this one, we left Rochester at 9 o'clock. Minneapolis, stopped in Houston, and we got to 9 a.m. the next morning. Usually they're 24 hours, again, just because it's a long ways down there, longer than we think. It's a lot further south than Mexico, for instance. And we were glad we could check in early. We got to Santiago, Chile was our first stop. Santiago, big city. You're not going to spend too much time there because it's a big city. There's big cities all over. We took our city tour, showed us the central square. There are also protests going on there. There's protests that go on all over too, I guess. So the next morning, we flew, and there was 4 intercontinental flights as part of this trip. And when it's intercontinental, I thought it would be like a little puddle jumper, like you go to Chicago and it's a 2x2 from Rochester, sometimes even a 2x1. These were full 3x3, good-sized jets. We flew 90 minutes south of Puerto Montt, and here, that's the Andes that we could see out the window the whole way. Just beautiful to see those snow-topped Andes. Once we landed, we crossed over the Pan American Highway. It begins just a few miles south of this place and goes 19,000 miles north to northern Alaska. We did not drive that. I would not recommend driving the whole thing. So, fishing, it's a big industry, this southern Chile, and we learned of salmon farms. And you think of fishing and salmon and such, most people think of Norway or Alaska, okay? And this is way south. So why would they have salmon farming here? It's very similar weather to way north. The latitude here, I think, is something like Norway or Alaska, only in the southern hemisphere. So it'll be similar conditions. Learned how they raise salmon. They start them out in fresh water in big cages. I mean, the cages that they start them out with, the little salmons, are probably half the size of this room. And then they've got this giant vacuum cleaner. Well, it's not really that. It works the same way. They suck them out. And they put them into the big cages out in the ocean, in the salt water. And I would say those ocean cages, we saw stuff from a distance, they get a picture, are probably about 8 times the size of this room. And they grow out in the ocean, in these cages, and then they harvest them, and 30% of the salmon goes to the United States. So they're farms, but they're actually in natural water, but in these cages. It's very green in this area. It rains 220 days a year. And in this area, it's quite far south. The average high is 44 degrees in the winter and 58 degrees in the summer. So, again, it's kind of a long ways south. It's closer to the South Pole, to Antarctica. The fish market we visited was just fascinating. Oh, all this fresh fish out there. And I'm not a big fish eater, but it was really interesting to see. It was. So. Then we had a short bus ride at Puerto Varas, where we'd spend the night. Behind there, that pointed thing is a volcano. Okay? It last erupted in 2015, and there's many, many volcanoes in Chile. And first of all, if you know much about that country, it's really thin, narrow, and long. Something like 3,000 miles or something like that, north to south, and probably only 40, 50 miles across. It's the western side of the Andes. Lots of volcanoes. We stayed. This was from our room, I think, the picture, wasn't it, at the bottom?
Yes.
We could see 3 volcanoes from our room across the water. It was settled by Germans in the 1840s. I had some of my German ancestors come to the United States in the 1840s. They didn't all go to the United States. They were settled there. They were given free land and sea because they wanted people to settle this area. The next morning we set out by bus for Argentina. Now sometimes things don't always go as advertised. Originally we were supposed to take a boat from Chile to Argentina. It was supposed to be really a neat deal, but for some reason the water was too high or too low that it was impossible to do. So we went by bus. Along the way we stopped. We saw a little German village. We even saw a little Lutheran Church along the way. Then get a picture, you go by the bus. You can't say stop. That was unique. There's a few places down there. We went to the border. Any of you ever had border frustration? The day before, I guess they lost their electricity, so the border was closed all day. Some of the buses that came to the border had to turn around and go back and find another place to stay. They couldn't go into Argentina because it was closed. So the next day, there was not only us as planned, but for all the people from the previous day. 4 hours we had to wait to get through the checkpoint. Did the people seem like they were in a big hurry there? No. So, we crossed the Continental Divide, going into Argentina, about 5,000 feet. Some of the people were really excited to see snow. We weren't. Big deal. Snow in October. We'll see lots of snow pretty soon, but to each his own. Okay. Along the way, we saw the result of some of the erupting volcanoes. This is something like Mount St. Helens out west some years ago. We checked in our hotel Bariloche. We have a lake view for the next 2 nights. And in the morning, we took the ski lift up 900 feet to the top of the mountain for a panoramic view. Also on top, we had some hot chocolate and German chocolate cake because it was cool up there. That was the other couple that was no, we didn't explain that, did we? Yeah. No, we should explain who's with us on this tour. I'll let Jolene do that. First of all, there can be up to 40 people on these tours, which is a lot. But thankfully, there was only 18 or 20 because that was great. It was, but tell me, it was hard.
Yeah, we had probably the most diverse trip I think we've ever been on. There were 4 people who had been born in India. They were United States citizens now, but they came from India. There were 4 people from the East Coast who were Jewish background, and they were friends with each other. There was a couple that had been born in Russia, but they were now United States citizens. And then there were 6 people, some from Canada, some from the United States, that were originally Armenian. Right. And when I say Armenia, a family group, right. They spoke Armenian to each other, so that was interesting. And then there were 4 of us kind of from the Midwest.
Like us.
Yeah, like us, yeah. We all got along just really, really well, and it was fun to hear about their different experiences.
Who are these people?
Yeah.
But this is the one couple that was kind of back. They're from Boston, so does that make like us? Well, down in South America it does, Anyway, but it was a good group, and that's one difference between a bus tour like this too. You get to know people more, as opposed to like even a small ocean cruise with 900 people. You had lots of conversations with people at meals and such, but you don't really get to know them very well. Good group, and it really meshed together after a while. So we thought this was the prettiest sight we have ever seen. This is in Patagonia, just beautiful. The lakes and the mountains, and
Panoramic all the way around.
Looks like Alaska, you said? Yeah. It's beautiful. Banff or someplace like that. Just beautiful. It was. So could have stayed up there for hours. Well, we were there for a couple hours up there. Yeah. Okay. Then we took a walk through the woods to a secluded lake. There's some of our group there. In the afternoon, our group took a walk through downtown Bariloche. It was Columbus Day weekend. Just think, they celebrate Columbus Day too. Well, more so than we do, I guess. Okay? There was some kind of women's rally going on, and there was some kind of statue or something that covered up. I guess apparently they didn't like that person or whatever. But some kind of protest. But again, there's protests going all over the place. Next day, we fly to Buenos Aires, a city of some 17 million. Big place. Okay. Saw a nice dinner by the water that evening. And this is the Pink Presidential Palace. This is the capital of Argentina, Buenos Aires. And probably the most famous person that you know of from here that you've heard of, you've seen the movie Evita? Eva Peron. Okay? If you've seen that movie, it was through one of these second floor windows where she sings goodbyes. What is it? Don't cry for me, Argentina. I'm not sure if she really said. Madonna sang that. Anyway, but that's where Eva Peron and her husband, what's his first name? Juan Peron. He was a dictator for many years and such. So that's where that took place. And also here is where we saw the cathedral that the last Pope, Francis, when he had been the bishop, and that was his place in Buenos Aires. Unfortunately, it was closed when we were there, and we went back later, and it was closed for the day, so we didn't get inside, but we saw the outside of that cathedral. Football, soccer is big in Argentina. Most of the world is really big. Two Buenos Aires teams are bitter rivals, the Boca Juniors and the River Plate. And those stadiums are like our big football stadiums. They really are. It's a big rivalry. They take it seriously. Went to La Boca, which is a colorful neighborhood, colorful buildings and such. And of course, if you go to Buenos Aires, it's just like New Orleans. You got to visit the cemeteries, right? I mean, people come to Rochester, we're going to see the cemeteries. Of course, my wife is into genealogy, and we visit cemeteries. Okay, yeah. We visit our dead relatives sometimes. But anyway, but here, this Recoleta cemetery is row after row of mausoleums. It's a huge place. And the main one that people go to see is the tomb of Eva Peron, Evita. She's been dead 70 years, and there's always fresh flowers there. Yeah, she could be described as the Princess Diana of Argentina. Very well loved and remembered 70 years after death. And she rose from poverty, I guess, to be the wife of the president, probably the real power. So that evening, we went to a tango show, okay? And they even tried to teach us how to tango. And this was in the motel before we went. The top left there, you see Jolene and I tangoing. Well, as you all know, I have no sense of rhythm whatsoever. I just kind of move around and such, but they didn't care. Anyway, so we were among friends by this time. This was our group there. We were somehow, this is Jolene in the front left there. Yeah, my seat is empty because I've taken the picture. It was like a dinner show is what it was. And by chance, we were right up in front. And in the balcony in the back, I think that was the instrumentalist, wasn't it? In the back. So we went to that tango show that evening. And then we left the tangoing to the professionals. Enough. There's a closer picture of our group. The next day, we went to the gaucho party. 3,200-acre ranch dating to 1870. An Irish family settled this. And this we see all over South America. You've got the indigenous people, of which there aren't many left, just like we have Indians here. But there's people from all different countries that settled there, just like in the United States. And the Irish family had to be self-sufficient. They even had their own chapel in the top. Is that the top right or top bottom right? Top right and the bottom right is the interior, I think. Okay. And then the present house was built in 1950, but with no electricity or running water. Now think about that. Most of our houses in 1950 had electricity and running water, didn't they? But they didn't there. Not all. No, I say most. Not all. Right. They served us a beautiful meal outside there. We had a sausage, chicken, and beef. They kept bringing it around and such. Then we saw more tango. And then we saw this guy. And then we did that. No, not really. I'm not sure the Cowboys had time to learn how to do that. But then they did their cowboy stuff. Okay. We'll show you here in a minute. One of the things they did, this was, I guess, entertainment or sports or whatever, is they'd hang rings from this roster, like a ring. And then if you wanted to, if you wanted to impress your girlfriend or you wanted a spouse or something like that, you had to ride your horse with like a pencil-like thing and ride along and catch that ring through there, going through there. Here you can see him.
Now he's coming.
Some of the ladies took him up on the offer to ride around on the horses. My wife did not, but she got a ring, right?
Get a ring.
Yeah, okay, so. Then we fly again. This is to Iguazu. This is not something I had never heard of, but you should know about. Iguazu is an amazing, Iguazu Falls is just an amazing, amazing place. Any of you have seen Iguazu Falls in person? No, okay. It's in the middle of South America. I mean, you gotta fly there to see it. But here, what's interesting about this is Jolene right now, is she's standing there in Argentina. Over her shoulder, there's a river in between, behind her head, that is Brazil. And to the top left, the other side of that bridge, that is Paraguay. We didn't get to Paraguay. I would have liked to, another country, but it's a long ways walking across the bridge, I guess. And we had to show you a passport and all that. So, and our hotel was just yards away from the borders of those three countries. Iguazu Falls is the most impressive falls we've ever seen. We took 2 walks through the jungle to explore the Argentina side. 10 days later, the water was very high, higher than normal, so it was a spectacular view. 10 days later, they actually had closed the park because it was twice as high as it was when we were there, and all the trails were all flooded. Bigger, much bigger than that. Tigers and bits. Do they use those falls to generate any energy? I didn't see any evidence of that. You would think they might. All I can say is I did not know that they do. So we made it to the eating area just before it poured down rain. And because one of the national park trails was closed, we spent some time in a preserve for injured, abandoned birds and animals. And walking through there was kind of like walking through the Amazon. It was very, very similar. It was a rainforest. And there's our group that you see, or most of them anyway. The next day we crossed over to Brazil, because like Niagara Falls, you can see it somewhat from the United States, but you got to go to Canada to really see it, right? It's a different view. The next day, we crossed over to Brazil for different views of the falls. Watch out of the bridge. What do you think?
Anybody tried to go down there?
I hope not. Well, we did see, you tell them, yeah. The lady that we
Yeah,
sponsored.
Danielle, Virginia would know. Our gal from that's a missionary in the Dominican Republic. They happened to be here shortly before we went on this trip, and her husband, and I can't even remember his first name right now, but he told us.
He's from Argentina.
Yeah, he's from Argentina. He told us about a movie that was made, I don't know, maybe in the early 70s maybe, or the
Something
late
like that.
60s, about a priest who goes through the falls. And we watched it. It was
Made there.
Yeah, it was made in Iguazu Falls.
Forget the name of the movie right now.
Yeah, we can't remember the movie. It
Yeah,
was,
sorry
it
about that.
was some famous, movie star from the late 60s, early 70s who was in it, and I can't even remember who it was right now, but.
Anyway.
So Google Iguazu Falls movie and it find it.
Our last flight, again, we spent quite a bit of time flying, it's a big place, went to Rio de Janeiro. We checked into the Hilton Hotel on Copacabana Beach. Copacabana Beach. That was our view that night from the 10th floor when we arrived about 7 p.m. And this was our view in the morning. Copacabana is 1 3/4 miles to the other end. You can see it there. Beyond the point is Ipanema Beach. That's where that girl was from, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what was written about that. And this is a huge, beautiful beach. And let's see. But a month ago, Madonna Lady Gaga was there. Played for 2.5 million people on that beach. It's a free concert. 2.5 million people. That was just in the news a month or two ago. So they get all kinds of bigwigs and stuff that came there, and we were there. Not with bigwigs, but anyway. I got to tell you something about this. Some of you have heard this story before. This is a good one. We had a free afternoon, and Jolene wanted to rest in the motel, and I didn't want to rest. I wanted to take a walk, and so I decided to walk along Copacabana Beach. And I walked. There's the boardwalk you see near the street. There's a boardwalk there, and I started walking. My goal was to get to the end. I think I made it most of the way, but not quite. But along the way, not too long after I started, a young lady, probably 30s, 40s, young to me, she started walking alongside me. She says, are you from the United States? And I said, yeah. And she says, well, I'm going to the United States in January or something like that. Where are you from? And I said, I'm from Minnesota. And I said, sounds good that you're going to Florida in January, not Minnesota. And I wasn't sure if just practicing her English or wanting to make small talk or what. She kept on walking alongside me. And after a while, she asked, are you enjoying your time in Rio? Yeah, very nice. Are you staying here? And I said, yeah, we're staying at the Hilton Hotel back there. In fact, my wife is taking a nap in the room right now. And when she heard that my wife is taking a nap in the room, she did a 180. And went back in the other direction, and then watched. Within about 10 seconds, she found another old guy.
You still have your wallet?
Yes, it does.
Right?
Do you still have your wallet?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And I told the other guys on the group, why you and not us, Oh, also on the beach, they do warn us very much so that if you be careful of taking pictures with your phone. just don't do it because people will come right along, they'll grab that phone and they'll be gone. So you have to be really careful of that. So, yeah,
Jolene, is the movie Moonraker?
no.
No, it's not Moonraker. That's a James Bond. This is something else.
Is that Guazo Falls?
Yes. How about
Okay.
The Mission?
The Mission.
Have
The
the
Mission.
mission.
The Mission.
And that was De Niro.
Yeah, the
De
Mission.
Niro, Robert De Niro, that's right.
The Mission.
The Mission.
I think we checked that out of the library.
We did.
Yeah, so, but that shows that, this is a guy way back when he was trying to evangelize the Indians, is what it was, and so it was a really good point. So anyway, interesting place that provides some memories and stories. Let's see, is it February? Oh. Well, of course, the famous thing about Rio de Janeiro is Christ the Redeemer statue. And we had to take a cog train to get to the top of the mountain to see the famous statue. It's almost 100 years old. It's 98 feet tall, which is tall, especially when you're at the base of it as we are here. But from a distance, it's not big because it's a long ways away. But while we were up there, we witnessed a baptism going on up there. And some other members of our group, they said they saw a proposal that was happening real live up there. So it's a place to go. So anyway. This is the
Yeah, right this way, I'm doing okay.
beach is way down.
Yeah, you've done a couple of videos, right?
Beautiful place. Although I can't quite figure out, somebody building a city, why would you build a city with all kinds of mountains and everything in the middle? I guess it wasn't that big at the beginning, right? So, anyway, some more views of the city. Bottom left, that's the famous Copacabana Palace Hotel. There's a lagoon in the middle of the city. And then the big thing about Rio, of course, is Carnival, or Mardi Gras. Okay, and that was not when we were there. We would not want to be there during that time because it's busy and prices are probably triple, I would imagine. But we learned about it. And on the bottom right, that's a picture from the internet. I wasn't up in the air to take that. That's the Sambadrome where the parade ends. It's half a mile long stadium, seats about 90,000. 600,000 attend this festival in person. And again, you can go on just Google internet videos of the carnival in Rio. Just amazing. The costumes, the music, just unbelievable. But we went on an excursion in which we went to a place, one of the places they're called schools, but samba schools that they make floats and they have all the marchers and the costumes and such. So we went there and they told us how this happens. And we couldn't take pictures of the floats for the next year because that was all secret and such. And here we are at the samba school. The samba in Brazil is tango in Argentina. I can't tell the difference, but they dressed us up. Well, we're the rounded thing there, and on the big picture, we're the second and third one from the left. They did,
on the far
they
right.
did not give us choice of costumes. Those are all group members. The next day, we took a 2-part cable ride to the top of Sugarloaf Mountain, which is also the famous spot in Rio de Janeiro. We could see Copacabana from the top of Sugarloaf, and you see the circles there. Those are people inside those circles going up the side of that mountain. We were glad to take the cable car. Well, that's Copacabana Beach you see in the background. Now here, can you see Christ the Redeemer statue?
Yeah.
Very small from this point because, again, it's quite a ways away. It's, if you don't see it, it's on the horizon there, well, at the very point, to the left of center. This is the top of Next day we went to Convent Stairway. There's tiles all over the world, which was kind of unique to see. And then we saw the cathedral in Rio de Janeiro. It was one of the most unusual that we've ever seen. Seeing from the outside, you see that the picture to the left there, but what in the world is that thing? It doesn't exactly look like a church, a cathedral. It's like none I've ever seen before. It's like some kind of spaceship or something. That's the inside. This is the inside. It's built in such a way there's always natural airflow. Do not need air conditioning because I'm not sure how they do it, but all those tiles or whatever, the air goes right through. Seats 5,000 people. Beautiful place. And outside there's some statues. Top right is Mother Teresa. Bottom left is homeless Jesus. Pastor Cogman had this in his sermon, I think, in the last year. He showed a picture of that famous statue. The last evening, we had drinks on the 39th floor rooftop bar of our hotel. And that was our guide, Romy, who was very good. She was from Argentina. And also, that was the view we could see from the roof from that place, except that's where the telephoto lens. It was quite a ways in the distance. Then we had our farewell dinner at a Brazilian steakhouse. I should mention too, what this is a mate cup. Any of you ever had mate? This was a big deal in Argentina, that they would have much bigger ones than these, and they'd have a thermos of hot water, and they'd put some kind of leaves in there, and kind of like tea leaves. I tried to Google that this morning to see what can tell you specifically, and I couldn't find it. They don't have it around here, I guess. I think we tasted it. It's an acquired taste, I think. But most of the natives,
Icky tea.
but they have like a thermos, and they'll keep pouring it in all day long, and they'll drink out of this mate cup. And Romy gave us one of these. And also, too, I've got a 1,000 peso bill up here too, because this is from Chile, actually. $1,000. See that? You've seen that, Larry? Yeah. Okay. So guard it carefully. 1,000 Chilean pesos, worth about 50 cents. Okay. But also, too, Romy told us how in Argentina the horrible problems they were having with inflation. At that time when we were there, inflation was running something like 20% a month. Figure that out, 20% a month. And your money, they didn't want Argentinian pesos because it would be worth that much less the next day. And right after we were there, they're having a big election. And the Trumpian guy won. He was, the guy that favored Trump. And now I just checked yesterday, inflation is now down to about 3 or 4% a month, which is still 30, 40% a year, but compared to 250%, it's improved, I guess. But wow, just think of that. So, okay. And then the next day, we had a free day in Rio. We left the airport at 5, Houston, back to Rochester about 4 p.m. the next day, and that is the end.
Wow.
Good, right?